Okay, assalamu alaikum. All right, this is a another video. We've been challenged by another person who made a similar video entitled Mohammed, Racist Against Blacks. And he saw the first videos that I made, and he said he felt it was a good response. So he said if I could answer to some of the questions that he brought in his video, that he would actually take his video down. So this is a response to some of the claims that he brings forward in his video. Some of them are similar to the other video, but there are a few points that are different, so I will respond to them here now. Okay, so this person also uses the same reference from Ibn Ishaq, but as we showed in the last video, number one, the Quran tells us exactly what Shaitan looks like. He's made of smokeless fire, and we also showed that Ibn Ishaq is not a reliable narrator of accounts. Okay, so here he misuses the Quran in chapter 3 verse 106. He misquotes what it's actually saying. In English it is translated as a day when faces whiten and faces blacken. So, but those whose faces blacken will be told, did you disbelieve after your faith? So taste the torture because of what you were disbelieving. So this has nothing to do with the race of the person. This is not saying that you will be made a black person for disbelieving or made a white person. It's clearly talking about the face. And what this means is that the face of the person will show their expression based on their predicament. If you're going to be of those who head towards the hellfire, then your face will have a gloomy or darkened expression. If you're going to be going to paradise and heaven, your face will have a bright and joyful expression. And I will show you that this same reference is talked about in other places, and it shows that that's exactly what it's talking about, the expression on the person's face, not the color exactly. Okay, so here's another verse from the Quran speaking of the same exact incident that was spoken of in chapter 3 verse 106. That how the faces will look on the day of judgment based on where the person is going, if they're going to hell or going to paradise. So now it uses the words, some faces on that day will be radiant. The Arabic word there is musfiratun. It means bright, radiant, or shining, showing that it means that the expression on the person's face will shine bright because they're happy that they're going to paradise. It doesn't mean white like in the face of a white person or a Caucasian person. This is how they misunderstand or misuse these verses. It's clear. Okay, then in verse 41 of chapter 80, it says now about the faces that will be darkened because they're upset that they'll be heading towards the hell. It says darkness shall cover them. Here the Arabic word is skataratun. Their faces are in darkness or in gloom or gloomy. Does not mean the face of a black person, all right, or that they will be literally like black. It's the expression that they have on their face. It's dark, it's gloomy because they're upset, they're sad, they're troubled that they're heading towards the punishment of the hellfire. Okay, so it's clear these verses are many times misused. You see? Okay, here it is yet again mentioned once more. Same incident about on the day of judgment how faces will look, showing that the 3:106 does not mean the racial white or the racial black. Again, here is now further explained that it's actually talking about the expression on the face. Now in chapter 88 verse 2, it says some faces that day will be humiliated. The Arabic word is khashi'atun. It means to be humiliated or shamed. So now again showing you when it says a blackened face, it means humiliated. It doesn't mean black like in the racial black or the color black. And when it says white, it doesn't mean white as in the racial white or the color white. It means the expression is joyful or happy, or it's sad or darkened. This is clear. Okay, and then again, once again, same chapter, 88 verse 8, still with the same incident. It says here, other faces on that day will be full of joy. The Arabic word there is na'imatun. It means their faces are joyful, are happy. So now, as I told you guys, the best explanation of the Quran is by the Quran itself. So when you read chapter 3 verse 106, it may use the word white and black or whitened or blackened. But now when you continue to read the Quran, these other verses explain that, showing that it doesn't mean the actual white of a white or the black of a black. It means the expression is happy or joyful or humiliated or darkened in that sense. So people misuse this. I think sometimes the people who misuse it that way are the racists themselves. But if you were sincere, you would have checked further to see, and you would have never have made that argument in the first place. Okay, the next point that's brought up was a hadith from Bukhari, volume 4, book 52, number 137. Now, the version that he has, which is really not a version at all, Romans 120 Ministries, I don't know where you got that from, but whoever gave it to you is a liar, and that is totally fabricated. Nowhere does that hadith say, let the Negro slave of the dinar perish. That hadith says, let the slave of the dinar, which dinar means money, which means let the person, any person who is a slave to money, let them perish. It doesn't say Negro in Arabic, and there is no English version of it from reliable sources that says, let the Negro slave of money perish. First of all, this would be against the principles of Islam. In other words, if it did say, let the Negro slave perish, that means everybody who's not a Negro, you could be a slave to money. So if you're a white person, you could be a slave to money. If you're an Arab, you can be a slave to money. Only the Negro who is a slave to money perishes. That would be totally stupid. So no, wherever you got that from is a total fabricated version of the hadith. The hadith says, in truth, let the slave of the dinar perish. Anybody, black, white, Arabian, Hispanic, no matter what your background you are, if you are a slave to money, you will perish. That is the correct version. No version says Negro, whether in Arabic or in English from reliable sources. All right, moving on to the next topic, which is he brings up this issue of the Prophet having slaves, and he tries to make a racial connection. Number one, slavery was an institution that was in existence before the time of the Prophet. On top of that, we see from history that the Arabs had all types of slaves. They did not just relegate their slavery like the European Christians did to just attacking people of color, i.e. Native Americans and black people. The Arabs, history shows that the Arabs had white slaves, they had other Arabs as slaves, and they had blacks as slaves. As we see from the book, The Slave Community by John W. Blossingame, he says on page 49, from the 8th to the 9th century, hundreds of thousands of Europeans were enslaved by Arabs, Turks, and West Africans. So the point I'm trying to show you is that the Arab type of slavery was not like that of the European Christian, which was based on a racial hatred and a dislike for people of color, i.e. Native Americans or black people. Here we see the Arabs had white people as slaves. They had blacks as slaves. They even had other Arabs as slaves. Here's a clear hadith from Bukhari showing that some Arabs were taken as captives. Very clear. Here's another one again showing that the other Arabs were kept as slaves as well. This speaks about a tribe known as Bani Tamim, and it says that Aisha, one of the Prophet's wives, had a slave girl from this tribe. The Prophet asked Aisha to free the slave because she was a descendant of Ishmael, clearly showing that she was from amongst the Arabs. So this claim to try to stretch it and make it appear that Muhammad and the Muslims had slaves based on racism is wrong. These are clear evidences that their slavery was not based on racism. They just had slaves of all types of people. So your claims therefore are a failure in that regard. And then, although there are many other hadiths that mention the Prophet having a number of slaves, we wonder how he was able to have any slaves at all in the first place, since there are other hadiths that show that the Prophet lived a very simple life, not having much to eat, not having much wealth of anything. You see, so we wonder where would he be able to even to have all these slaves, since according to his wife Aisha, that when he died he did not leave anything except his arms, a white mule, and a piece of land which he had given as sadaqah. Here we see in another hadith narrated by Aisha from the collection of Tirmidhi that the Prophet showed that he had no need for slaves. As it said here, she said he used to patch his own sandals, he would sew his own garments, and he would conduct himself like anybody else does. He was a human being searching his own garments, milking his own sheep, and doing his own chores, showing that obviously he wasn't a man who would tend to use a slave in the first place. Here again is yet another hadith showing that the Prophet himself used to serve his own family, not allowing a slave. He would do it himself. As Aisha said, he used to keep himself busy serving his family, and when it was time to pray, he would go and pray. So it's clear that he obviously wasn't the man to use slaves on a regular basis. We will continue in part 2.